Welcome to another deep dive. I'm so glad you could join us today. Usually when we think about a construction site, there's this really heavy expectation of, tangibility.
Yeah, totally. It's an environment defined by things you can physically measure.
Exactly. You have your steel, you have uh, poured concrete, these massive budgets and timelines. You can literally point to a steel I-beam and say, there it is. That piece of metal is holding up the roof.
Right. It's an industry that's basically entirely governed by physics and finance. Hard materials, hard numbers.
Very little room for ambiguity. But our mission today is to look at the invisible stuff. We are exploring the really profound intersection of human dignity, psychology, and productivity on construction sites.
Which sounds a bit abstract, but the sources we have today are this fascinating blend of historical case studies from the Southern European economic recession and some pretty heavy-hitting psychological frameworks.
Yeah, and the hook for today's entire deep dive, the thing this all hinges on, is something incredibly simple. A 10 o'clock sandwich.
A literal sandwich.
Yes, and how this one sandwich saved a massive construction project from just, completely grinding to a halt. Okay, let's unpack this.
I love that.
So, to set the stage for you listening, we often think of construction in terms of, like we said, steel and concrete. But today, we're looking at the invisible cement that actually gets the building built.
And that invisible cement is respect. It's human care.
Right. So, let's get into the context here.
Yeah, to really understand this, we have to look at the years of the recession in Southern Europe. So places like Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece.
It was bad.
It was brutal. Unemployment was just soaring, wages were plummeting, and, the basic value of a human being on a job site was being severely tested.
There was this one striking image from the source text that really stuck with me. We're following this site, foreman named Fernando.
Yeah, Fernando.
And he recalled walking to the gates every morning and seeing literally more hands than bricks.
Wow.
Over 20 people at the gate just begging for work. And they were willing to accept any rate, any condition, out of pure, raw necessity.
And that leads to the really dark side of this economic dynamic. Because contractors were driven by fear, right? Or, well, maybe greed in some cases.
Right.
And they began treating humans as entirely disposable. The phrase on the sites, and this is chilling, became, if you're not happy, there are 20 waiting.
Ugh, it's so bleak.
It is. The engine of work just became sheer necessity. But it was an engine that slowly burned away all worker dignity.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
I mean, we're talking about a massive economic crisis. It's really easy to look at a spreadsheet and think, well, cheaper labor equals better margins. I have to keep my company afloat.
Sure, the spreadsheet math checks out.
Right. But Fernando, the foreman, he completely refused that model because he said it's like trying to build a skyscraper on quicksand.
Yes.
He realized that a humiliated worker just obeys in silence. And, when the soul obeys in silence, the work completely loses its meaning.
What's fascinating here is that conceptual border.
The border.
Yeah, the border between a desperate laborer who is just working out of terror and fear and a conscious builder who works out of purpose, that border is called dignity.
Wow. That's a great way to put it.
And without it, things fall apart.
Which perfectly transitions us from this broad economic crisis down to a specific, tangible event that proves Fernando's point.
The sandwich.
Yes, the case study of the 10 o'clock sandwich. So we have these Portuguese workers from the Northeast, from places like Mirandela.
Right.
And they traveled across the border to work on a massive site in Spain. And the logistics were, well, they were stark.
Very bare bones.
Yeah, they were given a boarding house and dinner, but the mornings were just brutal. No breakfast provided, no mid-morning break, literally no food until 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
And, we have to think about the reality of this work. They aren't sitting at a desk.
No.
They are swinging hammers, climbing scaffolding in the freezing morning.
Burning thousands of calories.
Exactly. So what happened next? It's important to note, they didn't stop working out of spite.
Or like a coordinated strike.
No, their bodies just gave out. The team stopped working because it became a matter of sheer physical survival.
So they reached a breaking point, and they delivered a very simple ultimatum.
What was it?
They just said, either there was food in the morning or there was no work. They didn't even ask for a pay bump.
Right.
They just wanted a practical agreement. A solid mid-morning sandwich. Specifically, a baguette with cured meat and cheese.
That is so specific.
I know. But the resolution is the amazing part. Management actually agreed.
They didn't just fire them.
Nope. They didn't cut wages either. They just provided the food. Respect was recognized, and work immediately resumed. And it flowed beautifully.
See, that is sensible leadership. You don't lose by yielding on a human point. You actually gain continuity and loyalty, especially in these away-from-home contexts, Sunday night to Friday night.
Right, because they're away from their families.
Exactly. Daily well-being counts double in those situations.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because, okay, a sandwich sounds like a minor logistical detail.
Just a snack.
Right. But it actually maps perfectly onto several major psychological and organizational theories.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
The classic pyramid.
Right. At the very base of the pyramid, necessity is a legitimate force. Like, without basic sustenance and energy, a person literally cannot focus or achieve any sort of higher motivation.
You can't care about a perfect concrete pour if your stomach is cramping.
Exactly.
And then there's Frederick Hertzberg's hygiene factors. I
Oh.
love this one.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, think of Wi-Fi or hot water in a hotel. Having it doesn't make you jump for joy. You don't write a 5-star review just because the water was hot.
Because you expect it.
Right. But its absence creates instant anger.
That maps perfectly. Food, accommodation, hygiene on a site, they don't necessarily motivate people to go above and beyond all by themselves.
Yeah.
But if they are missing, it generates massive conflict.
Whole rupture.
We can also layer in Adam's equity theory here.
Remind me how that one works.
So when a worker perceives that their effort totally outweighs the fair conditions of the job, a rupture happens because people instinctively try to restore balance.
Oh, so stopping work was them balancing the scales.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Blau's social exchange theory backs this up. The sandwich agreement essentially reestablished reciprocity. The leadership showed care, and thus the workers returned cooperation.
That makes total sense. And the sources also mention the job demands resources model,
Right.
where breaks and food aren't just perks. They are actual tangible resources that soften the physical demands, which literally prevents errors and accidents.
It lowers the cognitive load.
So what does this all mean once the worker actually has their sandwich?
What do you mean?
Well, if basic needs just prevent conflict, how do we actually create that conscious builder Fernando talked about? How do we go from just, survival to real meaning?
To answer that, we have to dive a bit deeper into the mind, the higher-level psychology mentioned in the sources.
Okay, take us there.
So, starting with Freud, he taught that work is actually a pillar of mental health.
Really?
Yeah, he saw it as a way to channel raw, instinctual energy into creation.
So it's not just a paycheck.
Exactly. And Jung took it even further. Carl Jung viewed work almost as a spiritual path.
A spiritual path.
Yeah.
On a construction site.
Yes, because people project their unconscious minds, and they literally build themselves by giving form to the invisible.
Wow. Okay, I see that. It's about identity.
And then Viktor Frankl?
Oh, the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps.
Yes. Frankl concluded that if a person understands the why of their work, they can bear almost any how.
So the how is the freezing mornings and the heavy lifting.
Right. And the why is providing for their family or taking pride in their craft.
That is powerful.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychology of construction proposes that even under massive economic pressure, preserving a worker's voice and their meaning is absolutely paramount.
Because that's the dignity piece.
Exactly. When a worker is dignified, a crisis actually becomes a school. They learn, they adapt.
But when they are humiliated...
When humiliated, even prosperity becomes a prison.
The prison, that's a really stark contrast.
It is.
So let's shift gears a bit. We've talked a lot about the theory, but I want to look at the blueprint for site leadership.
The practical application.
Right, because if I'm a site manager listening to this, how do I actually implement this dignity on a Tuesday morning?
The sources break this down into a really specific, actionable guide.
Okay, what's step one?
Step one is breaks with purpose. If you have physically intense work, you can't just let people work until they drop. You have to schedule micro breaks and snacks.
Manage the human energy, not just the clock.
Exactly. The second lesson is all about accommodation and hygiene.
Oh, the text had a great historical example for this one.
In Portugal, right?
Yeah, these major Portuguese projects, they had workers sleeping in these poorly maintained, freezing cabins.
Sounds miserable.
It was. And it led to constant stoppages. But then they upgraded to better cabins with real heating. And they even brought in cleaning teams, so the workers didn't have to clean after a 12-hour shift.
And what happened?
Dramatically improved morale and safety. The human climate changed, because they felt respected in their off hours.
Which perfectly leads to the third point, listening early.
Listening early.
Right. Small logistical complaints, like a drafty cabin or a missing meal, those are precursors to major stoppages.
They're the warning lights on the dashboard.
Yes. Solving them early prevents those silent strikes where people just stop caring.
And that ties into the psychological contract, right?
Exactly. The unwritten psychological contract is worth just as much as the written one. It's all about aligning expectations of fairness and trust.
Which brings us to the final piece of the blueprint, human metrics.
This one is huge.
Usually site leaders just measure shift productivity, right? Like, how much concrete did we pour today?
Right, the hard numbers.
But the sources say you have to measure well-being indicators. Things like absences, errors, the need for rework, and near-miss accidents.
Because an increase in rework isn't just a materials issue.
No.
It's a sign that the crew is exhausted or disengaged.
Exactly. It's a sign that the invisible cement is crumbling.
So true.
So let's recap this whole journey for you listening. We started in the depths of economic desperation.
Yeah, with 20 guys at the gate.
And we saw a massive project saved by a simple baguette with cured meat and cheese.
The 10 o'clock sandwich.
And then we traveled through the minds of Maslow and Frankel to prove that basic needs really are the foundation of all productivity.
They absolutely are. And to give the final word here, the text leaves us with these two really profound reflections.
Let's hear them.
First, a project progresses at the speed of the care given to those who build it.
Wow.
And second, dignity is the renewable energy of the construction site. Necessity can raise walls, but only dignity builds human buildings.
Only dignity builds human buildings.
Okay.
That is incredible.
It really reframes everything.
It does. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to just sort of mull over on your own.
Yeah.
We've looked at this through the lens of physical construction, hard hats and scaffolding. But think about your own workplace, your own site.
Whatever industry you're in.
Exactly. What is the 10 o'clock sandwich in your industry?
Oh, that's a great question.
What is that one small, easily overlooked human need that, if you ignore it, quietly stops all your progress?
You have to find your sandwich.
Find your sandwich. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.